Good evening, gang. Well, I'm getting out when it's getting dark, so I don't know how much of my my walk will be visible, although my voice may be. I have a couple of observations, and they're basically optimistic. And I wouldn't say that we've won, and I know we couldn't rest on our laurels, but there's a dynamic working since the debate. For voters, particularly independents and old school Republicans, and those who have a sense of public deportment, there is a leaning toward, a movement toward Kamala and Tim. And it makes sense. They've seen a professional woman push back against a man who seems to have been the immovable object when others have tried in the past. She underscored his weakness, but that's not a magic trick. The man doesn't have the command of the characteristics that a president needs to have. If I can push your buttons and you're thereby compromising America, you're not doing well on your interview. And then we have the evidence afterwards, and I won't repeat what I said yesterday about Trump going into the spin room and what he had to say. But since that time, we have the story or statement from Trump on not much Truth Social. It's called Truth Social. And it's about supposedly Taylor Swift endorsing Trump. But you would scratch your head and say, when could that have ever happened? And the answer, it never did. It's an AI false story, artificial intelligence false story. And this is something we're going to have to watch, but you can't leave your mind at home or operate with it turned off. And this kind of snarky lying is just not the way any president should act. Now, a member of his transition team, Elon Musk, he went after Swift as well. And because she posed with a cat and said she was a single cat lady, he answered, "I will give her a child and guard your pets." Whoa. Now, the first part sounds like the kind of assault that is actionable. And if somebody didn't go to his place of business or house and interview him, they really should have. Because that's not acceptable. And that kind of a public statement, if not acted upon by Elon Musk, might be acted upon by others. And that's just not acceptable. But you see, these guys, they will do anything to get to that point, and that point being winning. So I'm sure that Trump is saying, down in Georgia, they dismissed a couple of counts. Well, it's true, but there are still 8 counts pending against Trump in the Georgia courtroom. And we have another judge that's not showing much backbone, if you will. But that's par. We've gotten used to that. And we can see that we're going to take this guy on the ground. We're going to build and build until there is no Trump, and that he loses on Election Day, and he loses badly enough that we may have strength in the House and the Senate as well as the White House. That's our objective. So, and there are these indications too in the courts, not owned by Trump, like the North Dakota judge. He struck down a near total abortion ban in the state. That's good news. And then, I don't know if you know Barbara Comstock. I knew her when she was a justice, very conservative Republican. She and I would debate on Fox TV when I appeared years ago before the 2016 election. And she came on today and spoke about the troubles facing Republican women. That the leader of the party is not a person of policy, not a person of content. And the exact words, she called him a horrible misogynist. And, you know, in what historical framework would any political pro recommend that the Republican Party should have two misogynists as candidates? JD and Don the Man. You know, this is where we are. And Trump is obviously feeling it because he said no more debates, as if he won. But this, you know, we've seen him. So what do I think is going to happen? Well, enough polls may not come in for as long as 2 weeks, but we have some indication of the general reaction to the so-called debate. And it's very favorable to Kamala Harris and, of course, to Tim Walz, her vice presidential parent. So we have that. And we're seeing Republicans uncomfortable and stirring with some prominence so that they may be persuasive to others. What is that about? That's about what we call down the ballot races. In other words, at the top of the ballot is this guy Trump and JD. And going down that, there are congresspersons on that ballot. And depending on the state, there may be local offices. But all of Congress is up. That's the House of Representatives. A lot of senators are up. And so in any tight race, if Trump starts bailing, and it looks like others are bailing for him, then the people down ballot have to worry. Now, I myself have the scars of this because in 1984, when I ran for Congress, Mondale was at the top of the ticket. And I had won a primary, and so I was the nominee for the 10th Congressional District in Northern Virginia, the one that Barbara Comstock later had, and Wexton got from Comstock. And you may remember Wexton because I featured her courage in the face of disease at a recent Democratic committee meeting. But all of this is to say that in my own personal experience, I was polling better until the final days when the Republicans spent their money in their argument. And a large part of it was the statement by Mondale at the Democratic Convention in San Francisco, and I was standing on the floor of the convention when Mondale said, "Ronald Reagan will raise your taxes. So will I. He won't tell you I just did." And everybody roared, and I couldn't believe it because I thought this was the end of my campaign. And for a long time, I ran around saying I was an Irishman with short arms and deep pockets, and I wasn't going to increase anybody's taxes. Well, it seemed like, you know, a month out of the election, that is in October, before November, it looked like maybe that was working, but it didn't. And so that's what Republicans are doing now. They're counting the points they can afford to give up with a loser at the top of the ticket. And they've waited too late to make the choice in such a fashion that they could argue it from now to Election Day. What do I think that means? Well, it's too early to be sure of the diagnosis, political diagnosis. But the trend in many more factors now is trending toward a humiliating defeat for Trump. Now, things can change. We see this is a suspenseful game. And we've had enormous twists in this election already. So I suppose you could say anything could happen. But of the things that are happening, they fit a certain pattern. And Kamala is really trying to unite among the undecideds. And that is also, in in terms of subcategories, that encompasses Republicans who haven't been happy, and it's got to be a lot of women, and independents who start not wanting to be part of a party. And so this hectoring, slamming, bullying, lazy researching bigot who would be our dictator is sending a message to those people. And Kamala is going to be, at her young age, out there every day, young for when you consider the matchup here, and she's going to spend her energy to the last second. And if she does that, and we do what we're supposed to do, we're finally going to bar the door to this worthless individual. And then we can get about the process of prosecuting him on the civil side and on the criminal side. And having learned from Nixon that if you let these guys go, it just encourages them to come back. So we don't want any more bad news from this bad guy. And so we cast him out, and we bring in the forward-looking pairing of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz all the way to the West Wing. And I hope you and I will be standing at the inauguration on a very cold day in January next year, celebrating the fact that we've finally gotten the toxins out of our system, so we're ready to move forward. So that's what I got to say. And I'm going to continue to walk in the dark, and I'll be careful. But for the meantime, I say goodbye to you in my cathedral of trees. All the best.